morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Today I'm going to talk about The Amazing Spider-Man 2. A lot of you have been asking me for my thoughts on this film, particularly Jayden Prince, and also on Andrew Garfield's headline-making comments that perhaps MJ, after Shailene Woodley was cut, should be played by Michael B. Jordan, and Peter Parker should explore whether or not he's bisexual or just becomes flat-out gay. And you know what? I have been ignoring the film to some degree, and I think that everybody has. That's really fascinating. When you take a look at San Diego Comic-Con, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 released a teaser trailer for Electro at the beginning. And for about 24 hours, the thing got a ton of views. Everyone was watching it. But then it dropped off the face of the earth when Warner Brothers announced Batman Superman for 2015, and then the very same day, Marvel announced Avengers Age of Ultron. So it was really a 1-2 punch that KO'd The Amazing Spider-Man 2 at San Diego Comic-Con. And it brings up a bigger question as to whether or not we might finally be reaching a oversaturation point with genre films. We've definitely reached it in the family market, which you've seen at the box office this summer, with really only Despicable Me 2 emerging unscathed from really an overcrowded marketplace. And some have even said that earlier this summer, that might be what happened to White House Down, Man of Steel, and World War Z. I mean, White House Down's the only real flop there, and I think that both Man of Steel and World War Z will live to see another film. Definitely Man of Steel. It's going to be that Batman-Superman film. But, you know, I think both Man of Steel didn't quite make as much as Warner Brothers had hoped it would. I think secretly they would have liked to see it get to $1 billion because it was riding so closely on the coattails of Nolan's Dark Knight films, the last two Dark Knight movies. You know, you never want to lose that momentum, which is why I think they're bringing Batman back in. And World War Z was more successful than Paramount had thought, but because it was so expensive to make, I think they're still not going to really totally make their money back, at least not theatrically. So I'm wondering, you know, 2014 definitely is going to be crowded, but 2015 is that year to watch. It's the year of both the Avengers Age of Ultron and Batman Superman. You have the new Star Wars movie. There's just so many films coming out that year that are genre specific that one has to wonder if that'll be the breaking point where they start to cannibalize each other. Because as you can see, it's already happening publicity-wise. So let's start out with those Andrew Garfield comments about Mary Jane, because I guess that those are the most salacious and captured everyone's attention, which I thought was interesting. When he said those comments, I felt Andrew Garfield was just trying to stop the tabloid whirlwind that had erupted when Shailene Woodley was cut as Mary Jane. I think it's bad publicity for the film to talk so much about a character who isn't going to be there. I think it's bad publicity to discuss that perhaps Shailene Woodley wasn't considered supermodel-y enough for the role. I think you want to end that conversation as quickly as possible. And that's why that's why I thought he did it. And it succeeded to some degree. Nobody's talking about that anymore. But a lot of you, based on your request to me to discuss it, I think a lot of you took it seriously. And perhaps Andrew Garfield did mean it seriously. Perhaps he mentioned it in a slightly joking way, but maybe that was the best way to kind of introduce the idea. What do I think? Well, first of all, Michael B. Jordan's never going to play Mary Jane Watson, or whatever the male version of that name would be, because I would bet very good money he's going to be Johnny Storm. So he's going to be really, he's going to be doing some race bending instead of gender bending over in Fox's Fantastic Four. As for the idea of gender bending in a comic book film, I mean, I don't know. I mean, everyone talks about. I guess you could say it's the next logical step after changing Perry White. But you know what? When I say, even as I say that out loud, the whole point of changing Perry White to Lawrence Fishburne, taking a white character and making him black, is that it doesn't change the character. It's not like they're doing a bunch of civil rights and race stories on the Daily Planet now. The whole point is that the color of Perry White's skin didn't matter. Lawrence Fishburne was a compelling character, and he did a nice job portraying Perry White. I liked the work that he did in the film. But if you're going to change the gender of a character, especially a romantic character, then you're changing the story, and then that is a political statement to some degree. And I don't think that Spider-Man should be bogged down with that. So, and also the Mary Jane, Peter Parker, Gwen Stacy love triangle, which I think they seem to be getting rid of if they're not going to bring in Mary Jane until after the death of Gwen Stacy, which seems to be what they're doing now. That's an iconic part of comic book history and comic book lore. I think it should be depicted as it was done, especially because the whole point of this reboot, I thought, of the Spider-Man reboot, was to be more faithful to the original films. And that's what I loved about the first film. I loved the fact that, it looked like Spider-Man swung right off the comic book page. They took poses that Romita had drawn during the, some of Spider-Man's peak times as a comic book, and the special effects had finally gotten to a place, just like with Superman, where you could have a character that was as believable in a live-action film as he was drawn on the page, and that's really remarkable. And that was my favorite part of Spider-Man. I thought it was well cast. I thought doing an origin story again was a mistake. I'm excited to see what they can do now that that is no longer weighing them down. But I do have concerns that the new film will be weighed down by too many characters. You've got Dane DeHaan as Harry Osborn. You've got Jamie Foxx as Max Dillon / Electro. You have Paul Giamatti as the Rhino. And also Felicity Jones is there as a female bad guy. Some people had said they thought she would be Black Cat, but she let it slip that she's supposed to be the Green Goblin's girlfriend, which I found very fascinating because it's like, is she going to be like, she's Dane DeHaan's age, so is she going to be Harry Osborn's father's very young girlfriend? Because Norman Osborn is the original Green Goblin. Or is this film going to totally skip Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin and go straight to Harry, which would also be weird. So I don't know what's going on. I think a little bit too many characters. I can see why they wanted to get rid of Mary Jane, but I think they maybe should have cut some more. I think these movies work best when they are able to be simple and streamlined and focus on just telling a good story, not trying to do too much fan service. I mean, we all love fan service. I love fan service, but I think that it can be achieved without such a big cost to the story. It should be secondary. So, Amazing Spider-Man 2, having some trouble grabbing the headlines. We'll see what happens, but at least it's coming out in 2014, a little bit ahead of the game of that 2015 tsunami. So, the other thing I want to talk about today, the second story, is that Pee Wee Herman says he is getting another movie in 2014. He's been working on it for a very long time, promising it for a very long time, but he says he's finally picked a director, secured his financing, and they're just doing some final tweaks to the script, and it's going to come out next year. And the rumor is that Judd Apatow will direct. At the very least, I have heard that he's very heavily involved in the film. And Judd Apatow is no stranger to racy comedy. But I really wonder if Pee Wee Herman can ever fully reintegrate himself into the mainstream. If you are not familiar with Pee Wee Herman, he was the host of a very popular children's show in the 80s, but then in 1991 he was arrested in Florida in an adult movie theater for indecent exposure. You can read between the lines there for what happened. And then, his career really took a tumble because, obviously as a children's performer you just can't get caught there. And I know it's his personal life and he wasn't in character, but at the same time I think you have a responsibility when you take on that role business-wise in your public life. You have to, it's always like Britney Spears being like, I never signed on to be a role model. And it's like, well, that kind of is a given, Britney. It comes with the territory. So I feel that Pee Wee Herman, I think he has a very strong fan base. Almost, I would say, like, just like The Nightmare Before Christmas has a very strong fan base. The thing's never going to generate a huge amount of money, but, if the Hollywood is savvy, just like Disney is savvy with that property, and they put out just the right amount of product to capitalize on it, I think, Pee Wee Herman, if this is an inexpensive movie, it could make its money back. But I think that once you fall from that height in that way, I just don't think that Pee Wee Herman, a.k.a. Paul Reubens, can ever really get back into the mainstream. I think at best he can hope to kind of take on Crispin Glover status, which you might argue he already has, where he's very well known to cinephiles and genre fans, and that enables him to get supporting work and to pop up here and there, much to the delight of that small fan base. The third thing I want to talk about is another kind of controversy that's come out around the Lone Ranger. And you might have seen the headlines in the last few days, is that Armie Hammer and Johnny Depp are out in Europe promoting the film. And they're going around telling the European press that the reason the film did so poorly here at the box office is because the American critics had it out from it from the beginning, and they torpedoed the film. To some degree, I think that is slightly true. The reviews for The Lone Ranger were really horrible. However, I don't know if you might have caught my review. I thought the film was good. It wasn't spectacular. I felt it was a little bloated. I felt that it sometimes did lose its way a little bit, but there were sequences in it that were just as good as Pirates. However, Mark Wahlberg interestingly weighed in on this at the premiere of Two Guns, and he made some headlines when he said, look, the real issue is that you've got $250 million spent on a movie about two guys and a horse. And I don't really know if it's good etiquette for Mark Wahlberg to be commenting on someone else's movie. He's certainly been in his own flops. But, I think he has a point. I think Disney, talk about a runaway train, I think Disney really let this film get away from them. They tried to bring the budget down. Bruckheimer and company agreed, only for it to go right back up while they were shooting it still. And I think that hurt the film as well. But as I said, the final product was also bloated. So I think, as I always say with Warner Brothers and now with Disney, you can't give your talent just complete free reign. They're not, a lot of times they're not businessmen. I mean, Mark Wahlberg to some degree is a businessman. He produces a lot of his own films. And I think he made a very smart comment about that, even if I don't think it was appropriate. So, you know, studio heads need to realize that they are in charge of the purse strings. It's, you know, they're the ones left holding the huge write-off. I think it's about 150 to 190 million they're going to lose on the Lone Ranger. And, you know, that doesn't help Bruckheimer either, because rumor is that Disney is going to give them a much smaller budget for Pirates 5. And they should. I think that because they use the same creative team, I think that the Lone Ranger has actually had the horrible side effect of hurting the Pirates franchise as well. But I did enjoy parts of Lone Ranger, as I said, quite a bit. And I really liked it a lot. And I think, you know what, that's what I would say about this. If Johnny Depp and Armie Hammer want to talk about the way critics might have been a little unfair to the film, that's fine. But they also need to be fair about how they might have been a little bit irresponsible with maybe their salary requests and the spending and the budget for the film. I mean, you can't have a one-sided, honest conversation. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So that's today's morning movie news. I hope you enjoyed it. Write down below anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, as well as any questions you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.